So recently you've probably heard a whole lot about this Saharan dust that is coming across the Atlantic. It's coming from Africa, and normally it quite comes up through the Gulf Coast and enters the United States. And if you haven't heard about this before, you're probably thinking, what is this? And should I be concerned that my world could potentially be covered in dust? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about in this episode of the EF Show. So, this whole dust cloud that we're talking about is not going to physically put dust on the ground all over wherever you live. It's not going to ruin everything. It's not going to do all that. What it does do, however, is kind of cover the landscape in more of a dusty sky. Rather than actually being on the ground, it's going to be more of a sky thing. And that's because all of this is being lofted out of Africa, and due to the sea breeze actually being picked up even more way up high in the atmosphere, tens of thousands of feet. So this Saharan dust, the first round of it that came through parts of the Bahamas and parts of like Cuba, we did see these images of the entire landscape looking brown and orange. It was like all over, the entire sky was that color. So this all has to do with proximity to where this dust is coming from. And this dust just happened to settle down on that. Normally what happens is this dust is all way high up. So you can picture 30,000 feet, about 20 to 30,000 feet is how high a plane flies. So picture you're at the bottom of all that dust and you're in a flight. You're going to you're going across the country from Boston to California. That entire way, we're traveling with dust that high. So that's what we can expect with the height of this. Now, how far, what's going to be the real span of this? Now, it does come out of one place in Africa that's about 100 miles in width, is where we could center this down to at least the max of it. That actually spreads out over thousands of miles and puts some in the ocean. So by the time it actually gets to us, a quarter of the way around the world, we actually see a lot less than what actually started out. So the path of this went through the tropics, and now, at the time of recording this, which is Friday the 26th, it's down in the south, starting to work its way back up towards the north. And once it enters America, it's at a high enough level that it actually joins our jet stream. So it goes from one path and it curves into another one. So where we saw it enter parts of Louisiana, Alabama, and Mississippi, and even Florida, we're going to see it now start to shift to the north and travel more along the Mississippi River. Then we'll see it join the Ohio River, actually, because that's where the jet stream will meet it, and start to travel back towards New York and then eventually out to sea. But there is going to be a lot less of it, especially with land, because with the sea breeze, if it drops down, it'll bring it back up. So you still might be thinking, well, great, we still are going to have all this dust like what they had there. But once again, this is actually going to be different. And this is because, once again, this big impact is not something that always happens. It has to do with where the dust is settling, where it's rising. And a big factor in this is actually the weather. And weather has an effect on this, because if it is going to be raining and these big thunderstorms coming one way, it'll push the dust another way. Or if it's raining and the dust collides with it, a lot of the dust will be settled down. So that's why we've seen in past years some areas have tons of dust, and in other dust events like this, we see almost none. So the big factors that are going to play a role in this is it raining in your area? Cloud cover, obviously, because clouds can be lower than this dust layer. And then the biggest impact is actually what the dust does to the weather. It has a vice versa impact on it. And this dust can actually help stop tropical development. So you might be thinking, oh, great, dust, no one cares. But actually, it's stopping hurricanes from forming. And it normally comes about this time of year. So it's actually quite helpful that we do get this. And looking, there's multiple systems of this that could potentially come off the coast of Africa. And so we do see another one that could potentially happen here in about a week or two. But our biggest one is this first one, because what actually happens is whenever this enters, it creates beautiful sunrises and sunsets, because not only does it kind of float up in the sky, we're talking about particles that you can't see with the naked eye. So whenever you have those spread out, they kind of cover the sky so you could still see that blue color, but they give it a brownish tint, it'll actually look gray with some of that blue. And whenever we see that at sunset, in sunrise and sunset, when we get this combination of colors that could be yellow, red, orange, when we hit that, it actually makes it more vibrant. So that's why we get these amazing sunsets in North America, especially with this dust that is coming over. So the best areas for those sunsets are going to be pretty much south of Tennessee is going to get the 100% best sunrise sunsets. But looking back up into, we could say, the Ohio Valley, Midwest, Northeast, it'll actually add to your sunrises and sunsets in a way that it'll boost that color earlier, because looking in that north sector, we see that most of the sunrises and sunsets there, they're either going to be they turn blue quickly, or they're going to be very colorful. They're going to have those vibrant colors. So the difference is going to be, if there is going to be a colorful sunset, it'll start a little bit earlier than, say, a normal sunset. If it's going to be blue, it'll be different. It'll be more of a vibrant or neon blue compared to your normal sunrise sunset. So that's why photographers are really excited for this, is because it's not a bad thing, it's actually quite a good thing. And another interesting fact about it is that in the areas in the south, it actually, if there's a deposit of this ever, now this year there's probably not going to be a big deposit in any specific state, but if there ever would be a deposit, so a more dropping system of this, we could say, let's just say for 1 square mile, part of the dust could start to settle. It'll start to fall and settle in that area. It's going to be a very nutrient dust, because it's gaining all the stuff from across the ocean, from other countries, and actually can help crops. So if crops are planted and the dust comes, it actually will help make this soil more fertile. And this will allow for amazing crop years. Years with a lot of dust in the past that isn't blocking out the sun, obviously, but with a lot of dust coming in rounds where it's nice and spaced out, actually have been some of the best crop years. And we do see this over time, and that's why whenever we see this overall, we think it's a pretty good thing, because there's not really any bad impacts when it comes to some of this. The biggest factors we could see when looking at some of this is what's going on with some of this kind of blocking out the sun type of talk. And by no means do we mean it's literally going to be blocking out the sun. The difference is, whenever at sunset in some of these places down in the tropics, when we see some of this, it will kind of make the sky a different color. So that's why if you ever go to the tropics and you hear that there's dust coming, it's not going to stick around forever. It'll be like 1 or 2 days at most. But that's why that we see these photos that look like it's going to be like crazy apocalyptic looking. That's not the whole day. That's actually just for 1 or 2 hours when it first enters, because it's coming into an area that hasn't seen it yet. So it's a different every place you go, but looking overall, there's more benefits than I would say that there are cons for this. But it's something that if you ever get the chance to see in the tropics, it's definitely a different experience, because you could see a whole different look at what it could help benefit, what all could happen with it. But looking at the North American portion of it, the most likely thing to happen is going to be a positive impact on sunrises and sunsets. And so overall, there is nothing to be afraid of with this. So answering your question, no, you should not be worried about what's going on with this potential storm of dust. You could almost call it coming through, a storm of dust. But rather, we're going to see these positive impacts, such as great sunrises, great sunsets. It will have one con with kind of the nighttime hours, is if you're trying to get pictures of the Milky Way galactic center and some further out stars, it will block out some light from those, so they won't be as bright. You could still see them. They'll be a little bit more dim, however. So maybe not during the first few days of this. Maybe not plan to go out, and rather try to do a whole bunch of star photography, but maybe you could do some night time lapses or something like that, because it'll still look nice. It'll be a little bit more dim than what can normally happen. But you all will be seeing this after the first round has already passed through. As I said, this could be recorded on Friday, June 26th. Most likely won't post this to sometime in the next week. So it'll be after the first round of this is posted. But the second round, we'll be able to you'll be able to know what's happening, plan for it. If you want to go out and take photos of it, you can do that, and just be aware of what all is going on and what they're talking about whenever they keep talking about this Saharan dust. And dust can come from other places too, but the reason we only ever see Saharan dust is because of, one is the jet stream, because the jet stream moves in North America from west to east. But we do see a sea breeze, a kind of another jet stream level, that will allow stuff to come from east to west. And that's why we see impacts like hurricanes coming from Africa. They start off the coast of Africa and they come all the way up into our Gulf and to the eastern coast, is because of that jet stream. And that's why we see that dust doing similar fashions. And that's why in the wintertime, when we see storms form up in Canada, in the west portion of Canada, we'll see those start to affect the northeast, is because that west to east. And then we do see another jet stream that actually forms in the Pacific, that is from the south, that it goes from the southwest to the northeast. That's why when we see hurricanes that form in the Pacific, they actually form kind of, if we would draw a line through the middle of Mexico straight west, you can kind of say almost south of Hawaii. That's why we'll see those go to the east and then start to travel back up to the north. And that's why we see those stay out at sea, is because a lot of those are going to be affected by coastal winds from the west coast and then entering jet streams in multiple air pockets. But that's just how the ocean goes, because we see those ocean breezes, jet streams, all of that combining. So that's why we never hear about any dust from, like, we could say India or any of the Afghanistan, Bangladesh, any of those. You never hear about dust from those because it's not going to make it here because of distance, and the jet streams aren't set up to be able to hold and carry all of that dust across a landscape. So that does it for today's episode of the EF show, talking about the Saharan dust. We wanted to thank you for joining us for the first episode of the summer season. This is going to be season 4, because we didn't start out last summer. We started out in the fall. So that is going to be season 4. This is your first episode of that. Talking about real quick, looking at the season ahead. Episodes, we're going to start slowing them down a little bit. We tried to do a lot in the beginning of the spring, realized it was busy, so then we ended up not doing much towards the end. But most likely, you can expect an episode probably once or twice a month at the minimum, and then at the maximum we'll do once a week. That's going to be for the entire summer going through September. And then your fall, what to expect with that. We still haven't made a plan yet because of this whole COVID-19 going on. We don't know what everyone's going to be doing and what schedules are going to look like quite yet, but we would like to stick with every in the winter season, whenever it's colder and there's not much going on, we'd like to stick with a once or every other week type of schedule. And then in the warmer times of the year, we'd like to go once every 2 weeks or once a month. And so that would give us the best podcasts to be able to stay consistent and use and talk about topics that would be the best. And so what to look like, what the season's going to look like topic-wise, we are going to talk about some upcoming ones that you could expect. I have them written down here. So this one was a Saharan dust. Some upcoming ones is talking about, has the severe season ended yet? That'll probably be posted within the next week or 2 weeks. And then we're going to actually do a national parks month, where in July we're going to talk about some of America's national parks that you could go visit. And so since we are a weather and photography and astronomy channel, and we talk about a lot of that stuff, we like to get into national parks too, because not only can you get great photography there, you can get some great nighttime astronomy looking in some of those some of the dark sky spots, and some of those other areas that we like to talk about with photography, because photography is a big portion of weather. So talking about some of that stuff and keeping you informed on that is the best way to be able to, make the best out of a road trip if you ever get one. So we're going to be talking about those because July is National Parks Month. So we are going to be diving in to, I think it's 4 or 5 of the biggest parks. We see stuff like Yellowstone, Yosemite, looking at some other big ones across the country. But we're going to be talking about those full detail on what you can do while you're there, hours of being open, and other stuff that's around, stuff to look at, and some key features that each one has that's very unique. And so we'll be talking about those, and then we will be resuming normal episodes probably back in August, the middle of August, and that's where we'll be talking about the sailor's myth. It's going to be kind of a Mythbusters type of thing, and then we'll check in some other types of Mythbuster type of things where we could see cows laying down, other stuff like that. Does it mean there's going to be rain? And basically doing a Mythbusters but weather edition. So that does it for this episode. Thank you so much again for listening. We hope to see you back in July for our National Parks episodes, and we are excited that it is the summer and that everything is kind of ramping back up again coming out of this virus. So thank you so much again, and we hope to see you in the next episode.